But let me stay with the nuclear issue. It seems from what we've already looked at that on the presentational side there was a concern particularly about the thinness of the material on the nuclear issue.
Not by me, and not by the Prime Minister, more importantly.
In our evidence from Tim Dowson and William Erman, they confirmed the view that nuclear issue was manageable with Saddam so long as sanctions were in place.
Yeah.
On the 16th of September draft, it noted that with sanctions in place, Iraq would not be able to produce a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Without sanctions, it would take 5 years. And it concludes from this that the timescale would shorten if Iraq succeeded in obtaining fissile material from abroad.
Yeah.
So that's taken directly from the JIC, I believe. So basically, the line that's been taken here, put it this way, was the Iraqis knew how to cook, but they lacked the ingredients. So long as sanctions were in place, they wouldn't get the ingredients. If sanctions were removed, it would take them 5 years to get the ingredients themselves. But self-evidently, to my mind possibly implausibly, if somebody just gave them the ingredients, then it would take them far less time. I mean, that's basically the sort of position that they're taking. But you've now got a particular problem with that, which was retaining some sort of consistency with the Americans. President Bush, in his speech to the UN General Assembly on the 12th of September, said, should Iraq acquire fissile material, which is this basic point about somebody giving them the ingredients, it would be able to build a nuclear weapon within a year.
Yeah.
Now, that obviously begs all the important questions about how they would get the fissile material. So did you see that as a problem of reconciliation between a rather relaxed timetable suggested by the JIC and this incredibly urgent timetable that had been mentioned by the President?
Well, I saw the sort of latest Guardian conspiracy theory story yesterday and about this issue, and I had no knowledge of any discussions between Britain and America on that. As far as I recall, the only discussion I had on that particular section in the dossier on nuclear timelines was because in one of the drafts, I genuinely did not understand what they were saying because they appeared to be suggesting that Saddam Hussein could get a nuclear weapon more quickly with sanctions in place than with sanctions removed. And what it transpired was that it had not been, what they were not making clear in the earlier draft was the question of legality. So that is and another point on this, if I may, when this issue was raised at the Hutton inquiry, Mr. Dingemans, the Council's QC, took me through the issue in some detail and pointed out that the Institute of Strategic Studies had said that they thought Iraq could get a nuclear weapon in 9 months. Now, if we were in the sexing up business, I think I'd have been, and we'd have been pressing for that. So I'm afraid that on this whole business about us trying to align with the Americans, if that was going on at the intelligence level, I have no idea. But in terms of my role in relation to the dossier, I had nothing to do with it whatsoever.
But on the 17th of September, you sent a minute to Scarlett, noting that the Prime Minister shares your worries about this paragraph, the one that was in the 16th of September draft, and you would both like a timeline that says, quote, radiological device in months, nuclear bomb in 1 to 2 years, which was different from what had been on the 16th, and that does start to align with the Americans.
Well, it may
five years with no sanctions, but it makes it much more specific.
Well, maybe it does, but all I'm saying to you is that the point that I've been making in relation to nuclear timelines within the dossier was not about what they were saying, be they the JIC or the Americans or the Institute of Strategic Studies. It's the fact that I couldn't understand how in one of the drafts it had appeared to suggest that he could do it more quickly without sanctions and with sanctions. That's the point.
But that wasn't the only email you sent on that around that time. There was one on the 18th of September. You reported the comments of someone in your office who found the nuclear section confusing and convincing. It left me thinking there's nothing much to worry about. You are sorry to bombard you on this point, but I do worry that the nuclear section will become the main focus and as currently drafted is not in great shape.
Well, it wasn't clear. That's the point I was making.
In response, John Scarlett explained that they had no intelligence to justify saying anything on an improvised nuclear device, which was the radiological weapon, but he had amended the sections to make it clearer. and the section in the 19th of September draft does change, and it now includes this 1 to 2 year timeline. So something had changed. So that for some reason this had not been in the initial draft, but now it's saying, we therefore judge that if Iraq obtained fissile material and other essential components from foreign sources, the timeline for production of a nuclear weapon could be shortened, and Iraq could produce a nuclear weapon in between 1 and 2 years. That's quite a significant change, because you know, in the evidence that we had, the focus was on 5 years after the lifting of sanctions. Now we're taking up a very particular scenario in which somebody's giving Iraq an awful lot of help. Right,
but all I'm saying to you is I can only talk to you about what I know and what I do and what I did. And all I'm saying to you is that in writing anything that flowed from any intelligence assessment, then that was not my role. That was not my position. So if it did change from draft to draft, then that is because John Scarlett and his team have chosen, based upon the intelligence assessments, to write it in a different way. I pointed out, I think, a perfectly legitimate point, which is that I did not understand it. If you like, a layman's point, I did not understand what they were saying. And as a result of that...
as I said, this was not the only email. Yes, I mean, I know the email that you referred to.
It may not have been the only email. And the fact that somebody else, that email that you read to me, written by somebody else, it seems to me to be making the same
that's
point.
you.
I'm sorry, it's impossible to get a transcription.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Cross conversation.
Sorry.
The email I was just quoting was you reporting somebody else's comment to you.
Yes. And
so you thought that was important to...
Look, I think if the email is what I think it is,
There was somebody in your office.
Right, and what I did was I took at a stage... Look, quite a few people within the office have seen this in every stage, every draft. I took it to somebody who had not been involved in the process at all and said, I'd just like you to read this. You're now a member of the public. I want you to tell me what you think about it. And I think actually they're making exactly the same point that I made. She couldn't quite understand that point.
In your published diary for 19th of September, you say that nuclear timeline's just about sorted. So what did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is that finally, after a bit of discussion about it, that Julian Miller and John Scarlett had written it in a way that I understood, everybody else understood. But I cannot stress strongly enough in relation to anything that flows from an intelligence assessment, and I think this was very, very clear from the memos that you referred to, both my memos to John Scarlett and his responses, that not a single one of them at any time sought to question, override, rewrite, let alone the ghastly sex up phrase, the intelligence assessments in any way, at any time, on any level.